This is Ashley Simonelli, and you are listening to The Mighty Mike Show.
Ashley Simonelli is the owner and broker of Royal Palm Property Management in Southwest Florida. She helps her clients maximize their investments and has completed hundreds of flips in her career. And I'm super excited to have you on the show. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah, ever since Steve's event, down there, and I was just like meeting all these cool people, and I heard your presentation, and Steve connected us before that, and I was just like, I got to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. That was my first in-person speaking event, and I was a little nervous, but I think it went well.
Yeah, you did a really good job. Property management is something a lot of people get kind of hung up on. They maybe want to manage their own properties, and they just get confused about what it's all about. So we're going to dive all into that. That's your thing. But a lot of the people that are watching right now, they're trying to think about their first flip, their first deal. And so before we dive into all of this stuff, this knowledge that you have to share, and your presentation that you gave, just so much value. And so, but before we dive into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your personal life?
Sure. I have been in property management in some aspect my entire adult career. I stumbled into it. I don't think anyone wakes up and says, I want to be a property manager when I grow up, right? So I stumbled into it when I was in college. I saw a sign on an apartment community that I was renting at on their door stating that I could have a 50% discount on my rent if I worked there. And I broke college student. I desperately needed that. So that's how I ended up in property management. I was in school for nursing. I didn't care for it, but it's just all I knew to do from a small town. And I loved the everyday hustle and bustle of property management. And I mostly loved that it was never the same twice. It is different. It'll keep you on your toes. So that's kind of how I got into property management. And then I switched over from managing apartment communities to residential, I believe in 2009, which was, if you're in Florida, you know that the crash happened around 2008-ish. So, so that it was interesting for sure. Things were different. We managed a lot of properties for banks that had foreclosed on them from private owners, but also developers. We were renting like 3-bedroom, 2-bath, brand new construction, never lived in homes for like $700 a month. It was an interesting time for sure. And so I have been in the residential side of property management ever since then, and opened my brokerage about 4 years ago.
Wow, that is so cool. I mean, you're just taking life by the horns. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun for sure.
Well, you've done a lot of different deals, based on what I've read about you and based on your presentation. And I don't like to make the whole show negative. Those people who've watched the show know this. I always like to take it to the worst experience that you've had in real estate. And then we're going to go uphill for the rest of the episode.
Okay.
Take us to that moment. Tell us about that.
That might be, so my worst experience with investing or managing, because those are two different stories.
We can do both.
Okay. Well, my worst experience with investing, which was also a very pivotal moment for my career, was the very first investment property I ever purchased. I think it was built in 1953. It was a really old single family home. Nothing fancy, nothing special, but I fell in love with it. They had, the older homes have a lot of character, right? But most importantly, it was only like $53,000, and I was scared to invest too much money. 53, I was like, this is a great deal. Like it's fine. It's, just a minimal risk for my first investment. And so we purchased that property, and the inspection came back okay. There were a couple things noted, nothing big. Long story long, when the tenants that were there when I purchased it, when they vacated it, I realized that the inspector missed a lot of huge items, such as the roof, for instance. It was a metal roof, and it was an A-frame. The previous owner and the agent who we bought it from and the tenant were all family. They were all related, and I wasn't aware of that. So there was some substantial structural issues with this home. And there was also, the roof was a big deal, right? Because it was an A-frame roof. It was a metal roof. And they had actually went up and painted it so it looked like a new roof. And because it was an A-frame, the investor didn't go and walk it. He just went back through the property appraiser photos and noted when it looked new. and marked it as like a 5-year-old roof. So I learned a lot of hard lessons for that transaction because it ended up costing me probably another close to $20,000 to $25,000 after I purchased the property to get everything resolved the way it needed to be. So that's probably my worst experience with investing. I learned you can't always rely on inspectors. You need to make sure you're doing your own due diligence.
Yeah.
And not
Yeah,
everyone
they
is
say,
honest.
I'll tell you, they say inspect what you expect. It's an old saying I heard from a lawyer friend of mine. He said, inspect what you expect, and so it's so crazy that we hire these inspectors to go in and do this and to kind of protect our investment. And, there's one I kind of related to a story I've heard where it says, how do you hire a lawyer, to represent you when the lawyer themselves get paid when the case closes and they want to settle? And he says, simple, hire another lawyer to watch that lawyer.
Oh, that's pretty crazy.
And so I wonder, this is kind of just like a thought I had, maybe have an inspector and be like, listen, I'm going to hire you too, but it's just to make sure that he's doing his job,
Yeah, it shouldn't be necessary, but sometimes it seems it is.
Yeah. And we don't want to go around being like untrusting of people and stuff like that. But it's a great. So what do you want Mighty Nation, my mighty investors to take from that story? Should we like just vet our inspectors and get references, or what should we do?
Absolutely. Having an inspector that operates with integrity, that you can verify their reputation, I think is imperative. And I didn't at that time. At that time, I had started investing before I actually started doing sales myself. I was only managing properties, so I didn't have a whole lot of involvement with inspectors, and like I do now. So I could have absolutely vetted him much better.
So, okay. So definitely that's vetting them and your reputation, it reminds me of the dark web. And people said, well, like, how can you buy stuff on the dark web? Isn't it like, they sell all kinds of stuff. I don't want to say them on here. I don't want to get banned from YouTube, but they sell all kinds of stuff. So what keeps them honest? And it was a whole study, I think, at TED Talk. It said it keeps them honest because they leave reviews.
Right.
They have reviews. Isn't that crazy? Even on the dark web, your reputation matters.
So funny.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So checking references, checking their reviews, making sure that they're honest and stuff. That's powerful. That's good. All right. Now, how about your property management story? You got to hear that.
Oh gosh, I have so many. I have so many. There's that one recently that my buyer is actually closing on here today or tomorrow, and the tenant vacated, and we went through yesterday to do a final walkthrough and found it was a hoarder's home. And not only was a lot of that stuff left behind, but in addition to that, there were, I don't want to get you kicked off YouTube either. Feces. There are human feces throughout the home, and that's just like my literal nightmare.
Let's go. Let's turn the page to a positive note, Ashley, and let's go. What is your greatest experience working in real estate? I mean, there's wins and losses, but let's dive into your greatest experience thus far.
Yeah, there's many. There really is many. The best part of what I do are the relationships that I'm able to build. I thoroughly enjoy that. I have this one little old woman who I adore and love so much. She's 93 now. And we no longer manage properties for her anymore. She's since sold them off, but I still talk to her weekly. And developing that relationship with Dee over the years has been just a highlight for me, helping her navigate from how to investing to becoming a seasoned investor and really knowing those things, and also being the trusted person for her and others to come to when they're in situations that they're not quite sure how to handle. I enjoy it so much. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, building relationships along the way. I mean, I don't care what you do. I actually decided at one point I was going to get a wrap. Short story. I went into a Publix one time, and they don't have Publixes in California, and I come here to Florida, and I went in and they made me this wrap from heaven, and I was like, okay. And the lady was cute and she was flirty and nice, and I was like, I'm just going to come here every day. And so I started, and I met all the people who worked there, and I did it for about a year. And like, I'm still friends with some of those people. One of the guys' name was Sue, and we would joke about politics and stuff and, just give each other a hard time. And That's what life is all about, is building relationships. And so that's really cool. You guys still talk every week, even though there's no real business relationship.
No, she'll send me emails all the time, just telling me she misses me. And she's a very sweet woman. I'm very thankful for her.
A lot of times people are like, that's cool, you made a good relationship or whatever. What is the most amount of money you've made in real estate? You don't have to get too specific, but what was the deal?
For a single transaction, that would be a 22 unit portfolio was the largest single transaction. We actually sold that off market. It was actually a few months ago. We sold it off market. I managed these properties from the time that they CO'd new construction until that investor decided that they were doing other things and wanted to sell them. And then we sold them with another investor who we managed for. And so that was the biggest. And I think that was it 3.2 deal for that portfolio. So right over 3 million. And the best part was that the agent who was representing the other investor is one of our agents on our sales side. So that was a bonus.
That's a double win. So what do you want mighty investors to take from that story? What can both stories, right? What can we learn from your stories?
So that one specifically, I would say, again, it goes back to the relationships, right? Having those relationships and communicating with our investors that we're here to help them when it's time to buy or sell, and communicating with our other investors who we know are actively purchasing we were able to help both parties quickly, kept it off market, it stayed in-house. It was a win-win for everyone. So communication for sure. Number one, I think at the forefront of everything, and relationships.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, relationships are key. You've heard it all. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, Jim Rohn says, and I just love that. So what right now? I mean, you're doing all this stuff, but what are you working on right now that has you most fired up?
So we are, actively growing our management side of things, but we do a lot with sales and flips as well. And I'm really enjoying doing that. Recently, we have, I think, 16 projects actively ongoing in the renovation stage currently. And I think we've done so far 82 this year. And there's just something so rewarding about taking this property, which 99.9% of the time, it's a distressed situation. So it's either completely trashed, there's a tenant in there that hasn't been paying for who knows how long. There's a lot of different situations, right? But we take this distressed situation and we're able to go in, and it's like real life HGTV, right? We get to go in and make it something, make it beautiful, and either make it income producing for some of the ones that we hold, or turn around and flip it and make a profit for the seller. It's so rewarding to be able to do that.
That is so cool. That is so cool. So right now, flip. So if somebody has a flip, is that something that you might make an offer on, or?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do quite a few of them. And in addition to me personally, we have several investors that pick up flips regularly.
Yeah, so definitely you're going to have an opportunity here at the end of the show. We're going to give all of Ashley's information and down in the description below as well. Ashley Simonelli has been dropping some major values, so prepare yourselves because we're headed into the mighty flex round right after a word from our sponsors. Today's sponsor is mightywebsitebuilder.com. If you'd like a website to be able to showcase your properties, or simply to be able to show the products or services that you sell in a professional manner that ranks on Google, visit mightycontest.com for your chance to win a free website setup and a 1-hour coaching call with one of our mighty website builders. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. Guys, welcome back to the show. Ashley, are you ready for some flexing?
Sure. Always ready for some flexing.
Awesome. So, I'm excited. You've just been sharing a lot of knowledge. Your stories have just been really inspiring. And so there's a couple questions when we get into the flex round, is basically the tips, tools, and tactics, getting into the nuts and bolts about what makes somebody successful and like how they can be successful themselves. And so you mentioned flips. One of my first questions is always, what is your favorite tactic for finding deals?
I really enjoy the old school driving for dollars, although I don't get to do it a whole lot, here recently. So driving for dollars is always fun, but also investment groups, really local RIAs. I tend to find quite a few people in there that either work with wholesalers or are wholesalers, and that's always been a great route for me as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, RIA groups are good. That's why I started Mighty Meetup actually, because I went to a few of these groups and not a whole lot of them were online, even though we were dealing with COVID and stuff. And so mightymeetup.com, if you guys aren't already a member, definitely check it out. It's where we're going live right now with the show. And then for driving for dollars, those of you guys don't know what that is. I mean, just getting in your car and going and finding a distressed property. And so, tall grass, the roof looks terrible. There's cars parked on the lawn. And one of my favorite ways to do that, Ashley, is actually to go to the code violation list. I mean, I feel like it's cheating. And some of the people I know that do it are like, why do you tell everybody? I'm like, first of all, most people aren't going to take action on it, right? They're just not. But if you actually do it, you get city workers or county workers that are paid to go around and say, hey, that one's distressed. And then you can skip trace them, pull the list, and give them a call. And so that's one of my favorite ways. And so, yeah, I think those are some two awesome ways to do it. So what is your favorite way to fund a deal? I mean, you got some relationships now that you've built. Things are a little maybe easier, but maybe if you didn't have all the resources, how would you get started? How would you finance your first deal?
It's a great question. So the very first deal that we ever had, I told you about my $53,000 home, and then we bought a triplex right after that within, I want to say like 60 days or something. And the way that we did it is we went to a local community bank. I find that they can normally do a little bit more or are willing to do a little bit more than the big banks. So we went to them, kind of told them what we were interested in doing, but we were interested in buying those distressed properties. And a lot of times, especially if you're going through a wholesaler, you have to do so through cash, right? And
Yeah.
we didn't want to just give away all the liquid that we had. So we went to them, told them our plan. They ultimately believed in us, and they gave us an open line of credit. So we were able to go to these wholesalers and essentially close cash deals in 2 weeks. Because we had this open line of credit, we would go in, either rehab it, do a couple repairs, up the rents, whatever the case may be, put a tenant, make sure it was occupied and income producing, and we would go and refinance it for a traditional mortgage. So
Wow.
that was a game changer that our bank was able to work with us and allow us to do that.
Local community banks. Yeah, I know credit unions are a good one, right?
Yeah, they usually have really good interest rates.
Yeah, that's cool. And so again, you got to have your credit solid for those. You gotta have. So there's some obstacles, but the thing that I try to tell people is like there's obstacles in anything you're gonna do. I mean, try to go to a friend or family who actually loves you and ask them for 20 grand. See what they tell you,
Yep,
right?
obstacles there too.
Right. And we're
Yeah,
just
there's
talking about
always
20.
a way though. Where there is a
Yeah.
will, there is a way. Mindset is 99% of it.
Yes, absolutely. And so, kind of the next question here, diving into partnerships. What do you look for in a JV partnership?
I'm probably not the best person to answer that question, only because I don't have a whole lot of experience with partnerships. Most my businesses and everything that we do, I kind of do solo or with my husband. So I would say, just generally speaking, for partnerships, integrity. You need to make sure that the person who you're dealing with is honest and operates with integrity, whatever that means, whatever their part is in the
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about with the inspectors, just like finding out more about people. The funniest thing is like people give references and referrals. Like how many people actually call them? I like to call them. I mean, if somebody's giving you a referral or a reference for themselves, like that's a potential new contact for yourself. That's how I look at it. Like I'm going to call them and get to know them and see how well they know this guy, but also I want to make a connection with them. So definitely call and build partnerships based on integrity. That's really good. And so I've been waiting for this question because this question is kind of the highlight for what you actually do on like your specialty. And we do have a couple of questions here that we'll dive into in on the chat here. But what do you look for in a project or property manager? So we'll kind of dive into both. But first, when you're doing your flips, what do you look for in a project manager, or do you manage all your projects?
I do. I also, some of my agents will co-list with me, and as I'm training them on how to do these flips, they'll help me to do that. Communication is number one when it comes to those projects, because we need to make sure that, this isn't our money that we're spending, it's our clients' money, and I take that really seriously. So when we are handling a rehab project, or any project for that matter, communication is number one at the forefront. We want to make sure that our clients have a weekly update as to what's going on their property. They have photos so they can see what's going on, because most of them are not here. They trust us.
Right.
We are their eyes, their ears, their boots on the ground. So the agents that help me know that communication is key. We have a weekly report that they complete, send over to me so we can update our investor. And that also allows us the opportunity to make sure that the vendors that we're using are doing as they say, and that we're on time.
Very cool. Yeah. So project management is tough, right? Because you get contractors. A lot of people I talk to is like, a good contractor and a bad contractor makes all the difference in a deal. Like it could be just the best deal of your life or the worst deal of your life. So
Right.
having a project manager, or even like a general contractor who understands what you're looking for and the timelines that you have, is so important.
It is. And good contractors get busy and get behind, and sometimes turn into bad contractors also, right? So us really being proactive instead of reactive with making sure that we know what's going on and that they know that we're there to assist with those things, I think makes a
Yeah.
big difference.
Yeah, it's not all on their shoulders. Look, if we need to bring in someone to help out a little so we can make our timeline, let's do it. Especially if you didn't pay them all up front.
Exactly. Never pay them all up front. Never.
Less than half or less than half, right?
Exactly.
So good stuff. So all right, and so property management. Let's dive into this, because there is we could do a whole episode just on this, but I want to make sure, because you got a lot of flips under your belt. So I want to make sure we dove into that a little bit too. But what should property owners look for when they're hiring a property manager?
I feel like I'm kind of being a little bit repetitive here, but integrity is the number
Yeah.
one. Making sure that the person who you're dealing with, the company that you're dealing with, has an established reputation, and that they're handling what's most likely your largest investment, right? And you want to make sure that you can trust the person who's doing that. I mean, we've taken over properties. I have horror stories for days. We've taken over properties with managers who have just disappeared, along with many months worth of rent, security deposit, reserve accounts. And so, making sure that the person who you're dealing with is someone of integrity or an established company with a good reputation is so important.
Yeah, I like that. And so I'm curious, like as we're talking about this, like I was just talking to a multifamily investor, and we were talking about how property manager, the relationship with property manager and investor, and knowing how your property is doing. And I'm curious, like how it works for you. Like when you get a property from somebody, um, what do you do? Do you give them access to your portal, or are you okay using a portal that they have? Like I know some people have their own portals for all of their properties.
That's a great question. We use our portal. And in order for me to provide the best service possible, the service that our reputation is built on, I have to keep things organized and consistent. And it would be really hard to do that if I have multiple portals operating, if I'm just kind of, doing whatever the investor asks. So we have a portal, and how they, distribute that information into their portal is completely up to them, but we provide them with everything that they need in order to do so. So consistency with making sure that things are inputted correctly. They have 24/7 access to view any financials, outstanding work orders, the status of their property. If we take over a property and it's vacant, they also get a weekly report every Monday morning that breaks down how many people inquired about it, how many of those were pre-approved. Out of the pre-approved, how many saw the property, and if they have seen the property, what the feedback was. How did we do? How did the property do? So they
Yeah.
get that report weekly. And so that allows us to kind of analyze, if we're not getting a whole lot of traffic, why do we need to reduce the rent, which isn't the case these days, but in general,
Yeah.
or is there something wrong with the property? Did we receive feedback that there was like a large bug in it? Whatever the case may be, we're able to analyze it weekly. And then, of course, continuing with management, that portal allows for easy communication 24/7. Another thing that we put in that portal, which I think is pretty different compared to most, is any invoices for repairs from outside contractors. we're really transparent about not upcharging maintenance, because that's a big deal in our industry. A lot of, I'm not going to say a lot, but several managers will do so and not disclose it well. And so us providing the actual invoices for those repairs that are very, transparent, they can see, they can pull directly in their portal at all times, just gives them a little bit of peace of mind.
I love that, because that's actually exactly, I review I do underwriting for a lot of different investors. I'm as a realtor as well, right? And for deals that they're thinking about doing. And one of the red flags that always hit me is when you just see all these transactions paid to property management with no notes of what it is. It's just like maintenance. And it's like $90 for this, the next day $126. And it's not saying that it's not honest, but it's like, how can I recommend my buyer purchasing this property without seeing all of that due diligence?
And how do you, like, if you pay $1,100 to the management company for a new appliance, then how do you know what the warranty information is on that appliance? You don't have any of that information. I own a maintenance company as well. I don't do any maintenance on the properties that I manage at all. I keep them completely separate, just because I don't want to ever give anyone a reason, just like you mentioned, to even question it. And I think it's even the most ethical people, I think, would have a really hard time if you're profiting from maintenance and then also responsible for keeping expenses to a minimum, right? Like that's a blurry area that I just don't want to get into. Our maintenance does stuff on our property flips because we're able to bid it just like every other vendor and contractor. But on the units that we manage, we make sure that all of the appropriate information for the vendor is there.
That is good. Yeah. At the end of the day, integrity is everything, and having a double check system is in anything, right? Inspect what you expect, and you can't lose from there. So what are some of the other general benefits? Because I know a lot of people, this is one thing I see all the time is, as a realtor, and I know you see this too, you get for sale by owners, 95% of them end up listing with somebody because they struggle. So it's the same principle actually applies to people who own and they just want to rent it out, right? Like, why do I need a property manager? They're going to cash at me everything I need. And so what are some of the benefits of actually having a property management company?
Passive income. If you have a property manager, then you have a passive investment. If you are actively having to manage the property yourself, then that's not the case. And also arm's length transactions, right? It's going to be really hard for someone who is a private, it was hard for me. I rented out my personal property when I first got engaged to my husband. I moved into his place and rented out my personal home. I was managing properties. I was a property manager, but I thought I could manage this home too. And that wasn't the case. There's emotions tied in. And it's sometimes really difficult to treat the property as an investment. And that's what it is. It's an investment and it's a business. And so when somebody comes to you and they're like, I can't pay rent because I got laid off or whatever the case may be, if you aren't a property manager or don't have a property manager, sometimes it can be really hard to remove emotions from that. Remember that it's a business, but that is really necessary to overall maximize your investment. So having a property manager should hopefully allow for the property to operate as a business, which it is.
Yeah, I love that. Steve Rosenberg was on the show and he actually talked about that. And I'm curious to know what you think. Like, at what point does a real estate investor become a property manager or bring it in-house? I mean, that is something a lot of people think about when they're giving 10%. Or Airbnb, for example. Some of these guys are paying 25% for property management. At what point do you just bring it in-house?
So that's a great question. I think it's going to be relative to the investor and what their long-term plan is. What's their long-term business goals? Because if their long-term goal is to have these investments be passive income for them, then I would say never. But if you want to kind of expand into that and to start a separate business, a business that is going to require you or at least you hiring and training, then maybe early on, it's going to be really relative to the individual's goals.
Yeah, I love that, because that's what Steve said. He goes, if you're going to do property management, it better be a business, right? So like, it's not like you go out and let's say your car breaks down or, like, I'm starting my own mechanic shop, like I did it, I bought the tools, I did it. Now let's do it. Now I can't quit my current job. I went to school for 4 years to do it. So I'm going to be a mechanic on the side. So yeah, I totally agree. Like if you're going to do property management, make it a business. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like what kind of person, not that we're trying to like, obviously hire Ashley. She's got a great thing going on. Right. But for people who are watching, who are like, I could see myself being a property manager. Like who do you bring on your team? That might be a good way to start it. Like what kind of person do you look to bring on your team?
That's a great question. It's a lot of fun. Our industry is a lot of fun, but it's not for everyone. It can be hard. Sometimes I feel like our office can be more of a complaint desk that, people aren't calling us to tell us, hey guys, everything's great over here. The AC's working wonderfully and thanks for doing a wonderful job, right? They're calling us because there's an issue. Investors and residents and vendors alike, they're usually contacting us because there's a problem and it's our job to solve it. So a good property manager is going to be a good decision maker, going to be a hard worker because it requires a lot of hard work, attention to detail, a good communicator, and of course, trustworthy.
Good stuff. Now, do you ever partner with your investors on deals, like as a property management?
I haven't actually. I'm in the process of speaking with one right now to do so for the first time. We're possibly going to be building a spec home on a lot that he owns, but I have not as of yet. No.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. You don't ever want to partner with a contractor. But for property management, it might make sense. I know a lot of people when they're first getting started, you have one guy that brings the money and then another person who brings who says, I'm going to manage it. And, elbow grease. Exactly. Sweat equity. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that can definitely be a benefit as well. Is there anything else about property management you want to make sure we cover?
Just making sure that whoever is managing the property, whether it's yourself or a property manager, is staying up to date on the laws, the ever-evolving laws and statutes, I think is very important, especially in the world of post-corona, where you have moratoriums. I didn't even know what a moratorium was before that. And navigating those waters was difficult, but we spent the time and the money to do so, to navigate those waters, to know that of all the laws that were implemented and changing, it was a game changer for us, for sure.
Well, you know what, you mentioning that actually reminds me of something you were talking about in your presentation, the idea that the moratorium, didn't allow certain eviction for certain purposes, but for other purposes they did. So for non-payment of rent, you couldn't evict them, but for other things you could.
Right.
Right.
So that's in Florida. Not everywhere was like that, but thanks to DeSantis, he really kind of had our backs. And during a time where other states and governors were treating landlords like the big bad landlord, they had state, county, and at one point state, county, and national moratoriums. Whereas for Florida, all we had to worry about was the CDC moratorium, right? The national moratorium. Right. There were no local, no state, nothing. There was for like a 2-week period in March of 2020, but that was it. And so, that moratorium, like I said, we spent the time and the effort making sure that we knew that moratorium inside and out. And thanks to some of our local attorneys here, we, were able to navigate that and see that the moratorium applied only to non-payment of rent. It did not apply to a non-renewal month-to-month tenancy. It did not apply to lease violations. So, and here's the thing too, our local counties had a lot of assistance money, right? Like free money for these tenants to go and apply for, to pay their rent, assist them with other utility bills. And so if somebody was not getting that assistance and they were not paying their rent, chances are there's a bigger issue there, right? So during that time, what we would do is if we had one of those issues where the tenant was not paying, we couldn't get a hold of them, there was no assistance in line, we would schedule a property inspection. We'd go out to inspect a property. We did that for every single unit that was late or not paying. And 99% of the time, I think there was only ever one time that we did not turn up a lease violation. 99% of the time there was lease violations there. So in that instance, we were able to serve the appropriate notices and proceed with the eviction. And I mean, they were being completed in like 3 weeks because nobody else was filing evictions because they thought they couldn't. So the quickest evictions ever.
It reminds me of Ashley. It reminds me of one of the first jobs I had. I moved up to general manager, and it was a technology corporation, and it was based on performance. And whenever somebody would start to perform very poorly and not really care. It's like, well, fire me. I couldn't fire them based on performance, I guess, with the laws. And so they would always show up 1 or 2 minutes late. And after 3 write-ups, you're gone.
Yeah.
So it's like write up every time you're 3 minutes late. And so it might sound petty, but the thing is, it's the same concept. These people aren't paying rent. If you can't pay your mortgage, you're going to lose the property, and then they're going to end up having someone else new is going to own it, but they're still living. It's just no matter what your political side is, it's important to understand that everyone has a perspective. It's a real thing. Like, I know there's a lot of hedge funds that are actually buying properties, but most of the homeowners are individual homeowners that might own 3 or 4 or 5 properties, and you're hurting their retirement. You're hurting their children's future. You're hurting, by not paying rent. And so having a property manager that, and this reminds me too of real estate, right? As a realtor, how often do you hear of people that for sale by owner, because they're like, you're just going to put on the MLS, like you don't have any like special knowledge, it's going to help me sell it for more money, which we know isn't true. We know that we're going to negotiate when somebody makes an offer, a full price offer, and then they go inspect it and ask for 40 grand off.
Right.
And they don't know what to do. And now it's been locked up for 2 or 3 weeks. And then, and so they go through this process a few times with investors, and finally they list it. I kind of think about that the same way with property management, Ashley, is like what you're talking about with this moratorium. How many homeowners would have loved to have a property manager like yourself who would have had those people out in just a few weeks?
Right. Yeah. It was, we actually rolled out a landlord bailout program, and we helped a lot of self-managing landlords that were not sure what was going on, but they had tenants that were in and not paying. We helped them, and we helped them in a number of ways, right? Either speaking with the tenant and, treating them with respect and trying to solve without going to court or going through court. One way or the other, we were going to get a resolution there though. And so they were very thankful.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like, I love that aspect of it too. A lot of property owners that I've spoken to have said that, like, most people, they want to pay. Most people paid, even though they were told they didn't have to pay, which is a whole nother crazy, like the fact that was being said on the news. It's like,
right.
you don't have to pay.
Times.
Yeah, for sure. So the fact that these people came out of it, these people who, own hundreds of units, sometimes thousands of units, they came out of it. They still own those units. They're still fine. That means those people paid their rent. They got the stuff that they needed, maybe government assistance or whatever. They got the stuff that they needed, and have a property manager is a big part of that as a buffer. I mean, imagine being an individual trying to manage all that. I can't even imagine.
Right. Hopefully a good property manager will pay for themselves a couple of times over usually.
Yeah. So we have a question here. Were there any challenges that as a property manager you had to face during COVID? Good question.
Yeah. So we touched on that a little bit. We screen our tenants to a higher standard. So we didn't have, I think we had maybe 1% of tenants that we actually put in place that had issues. And we were able to, again, navigate those waters and come up with a resolution, whatever that may be. So not directly, but we did have that landlord bailout program where we, specifically we're trying to help self-managing landlords, and we saw those bigger issues there, right? I think the worst one that we had, there was a tenant in place that hadn't paid for almost a full year. And she was on a month-to-month lease the entire time. So it was just because the landlord didn't understand the moratorium. So that was the biggest thing. Also in the beginning, everything was super weird. No one really knew what was going on. I didn't even know COVID was a thing until like Florida announced that they were closing. I was like, what do you mean? What is this COVID? What is this Rona? So, really navigating how we were going to be there for our tenants, right? Everybody was kind of panicked. No one really knew what was going on. Our landlords too, they were really scared. They didn't know what was going on. So, trying to navigate how we could be there without being physically there for our tenants and our owners was a little, it was different at first in the beginning. And we came up with solutions like doing webinars to educate our owners and tenants on what was going on currently, and the future plans for our tenants, how they could continue paying rent without physically coming to the office, just things like that, communicating and making sure that they were as comfortable as possible because everyone was scared.
Yeah. Yeah. Very unknown, right? Like, how serious is this thing? Is this Walking Dead situation? Or, like, there's a little bit where you're kind of wondering what was going to happen. And so, yeah, navigating that and having a team. And so I think the key here I'm hearing with all this stuff is that, like, building a team, and a property manager is like kind of like your quarterback, right? Because you have contacts, you got the electrician, you got the plumber, you got you have all these people. Just like a realtor, when it comes to selling a house, property manager, when it comes to managing a house, has all these contacts. And so it's really powerful. And so property management is your thing, and I think anybody should reach out to you if they have flips, if they have properties that they want to manage. It just makes a lot of sense. And so my next question, kind of in this mighty flex round, and this is kind of going higher level here, so it's a little bit of a transition. But what is your favorite book you'd recommend?
Oh man, there's so many. I actually just put a post on Facebook a few days ago, in fact, asking for more recommendations on more books, and I have an ongoing list that's fantastic. I
So
would
cool.
say that anything put on or produced by Brandon Turner with Bigger Pockets, I found extreme value in. The
Yeah.
Millionaire Real Estate Investor being one of them. There's several books that he's written in regards to flips specifically. There's the book on investing with no or low money out of pocket. So there's so many. I actually
Yeah.
have that ongoing list. If anyone is interested, I'm happy to share that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I love books, and now with Audible and things like that, like, you don't have to sit there and read and sit. You could listen to it while you're working out, while you're walking, or driving to work. And so definitely, I know this is the greatest podcast and YouTube channel you're going to watch, but but you have options. And so those books sound awesome. I know it's funny. I hear a lot of people say Rich Dad Poor Dad, and which is funny because it's not even a real estate book. So it's always funny to hear that. I mean, I know they talk about that a little bit, but
Yeah. But it's a financial literacy book, and I think that that should be the foundation of any real estate investment. So that's also a
yeah.
really good one.
Yeah. Understanding that you own a job, when you have a job, you own a job. And so you better be getting more than money for that job, like contacts and knowledge
Mhm.
and skills to be able to take on to do your own thing, or to learn new skills and knowledge from another job. And that's where I've learned. So, what is the greatest advice you've ever received?
Answer your phone. Uh,
Okay.
the very first
And
broker I ever worked for, I worked for him for 8 years, and he said, I was having issues scheduling showings and different things with other real estate agents. And he goes, "See, take this as a lesson, because one of the only things that you have to do to be successful is show up and answer your phone. It's that simple." And
this is so true.
that was a great piece of advice.
It's so true. And so some people get caught up in this, like, well, I'm busy and I have the schedule and stuff. But if you can't answer your phone, hire somebody to answer your phone. Like, have something, because the immediacy that we live in today is they have an urgent matter. They want to take care of it. And there's this urgency versus, you know, immediacy. Like, it's urgent, but you don't have to necessarily do it right then and there. But like what you're saying, that the simplicity of it is so true. In any business, in order to get that business, you have to answer the phone, make that connection, agree to do the business or whatever, give them a quote or whatever it is, and then move on. That is just awesome. Awesome advice. So this question stumps some people, but I know you're going to be able to handle it, and you're going to be able to flex your mighty investor muscles. And it's not one that I told you about. So get ready.
Bring it.
Okay. Okay. So what would you do if you had to start all over again with $100 and a car? That's all you got, and all of your knowledge, no
Oh,
contacts.
$100 and a car. I would do exactly what I did when I was building my. Are you talking about for property management or investing? That's two different things.
Whatever. See, the thing I love about this question is that some people have other skills and knowledge where they may not even, if they started today, they may not even do what they did before. And so that's really powerful if if it's
Yeah,
different.
okay. 100% of the time, I will always redo the management part of it, right? I really do love it. I know I'm one of the crazy I don't think I've ever heard people say they love it like that, but I am one of the crazy ones. So $100 in a car, I would probably do what I initially did to grow my management company. And that was create whatever advertisement. At that time, it was a postcard, but I only had X amount of dollars, right? So I didn't have the money to mail the postcards. So I would take those postcards and drive them around to different properties, specifically multifamilies, and target that way, right? Or if I $100, I could probably do like a couple hundred from Vistaprint, right? A couple hundred postcards, and then mail those to the out-of-state investors. That might be another good one. Driving for dollars, I would still continue to do that, right? Because I have a car. I don't know, Mike.
This is good. No, this is good. Now let me throw in some other stuff that you've already said in this interview, right? Meetup groups. Go to meetup groups. You already said that, right? Find investors who want to partner with you. They see your energy, they see you're going after it, and then just putting together your contact list, right? Because you have your list of investors, and then you have your list of properties with potential for property management, right? So you would focus on property management first.
I would, because that enabled me and to develop the other relationships, right? That I was a manager before I was an investor. So it helped me kind of learn that aspect of things while helping manage these properties. And so I would absolutely start there again. And another thing that I just thought of is bigger pockets. I wish I would have known about bigger pockets way back when, because it is a free resource like Facebook, but for real estate investors, right? And just the knowledge that I've received from bigger pockets and the different forums and communicating with other investors has been just priceless.
Yeah, they definitely just bring the heat, from everything you can imagine. You can go on there and find it, even finding realtors in your local area and stuff. It's really cool. And so for somebody who's getting started, like we just said, right, what would be your parting piece of advice for that person that wants to get started in real estate?
Jump in, set a goal, and jump in. I hear often the market's too high, I'm going to wait. You could, and myself included, for a while, I was saying the exact same thing, but you'll wait forever, because there's never going to be a perfect time, right? So set a goal and put action plan in place to reach that goal, and give it a date. That's something that Steve said to me recently, and I never actually thought about it, because, I set goals, of course, and quarterly, annually, what have you, but giving it a specific date, like September 21st, 2022, just giving it that specific date is going to really help you bring it to life, I think.
That's good. Yeah, setting the goal, and then when the date comes and you didn't do it, maybe you could say, "Hey, okay, well now the next time, or, hey, let's push it forward. I got one more month," and it actually becomes real for you.
Right. But
Yeah,
most importantly, just build that contact list now, and then set that action plan in place, and then go for it. Don't wait.
yeah, relationships are everything in any business, but in real estate, it is make or break. You either have the relationships and you've built them, like the one I'm building with you now. I'm so excited to have you on here and hear your story and be able to kind of connect with you. I think I met your husband at the breakfast counter.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we're kindred spirits too with our beards, right?
Yeah, that's funny.
Pretty sure. So what is the best way that my listeners can keep up with everything you have going on?
Our website, royalpalmpm.com, is always a great resource. We make it a resource to help investors with a multitude of things. And then can always give me a call directly at 239-691-0810. That's my cell, so call or text.
Yeah, and she is married, guys, so take it easy. All right. So good stuff. Ashley, I just want to personally thank you for coming on the show. I've been impressed with your story. I'm excited to share it with the world. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
All right, Mighty Nation. Until next time, go check out her website, royalpalmpm.com. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review The Mighty Mike Show. You've been served up some awesomeness by Ashley and Mighty Mike. And listen, go out there, conquer your first deal, and take some mighty action. See you guys.